Daoland video. I am, as you know, busy with a series on parenting, and currently I am preparing myself for a workshop in Canada where I'm looking forward to a lot, and also I am busy with a translation project and several other things. When we are at this moment, though, I interrupt my activities a little bit because I was supposed to give a lecture at a conference, online conference from Allied Academies. I don't know if you know that organization. I understand that they are located in different places, and well, they're a business, of course. They are in the conference business, and that is their business model. I was supposed to give a lecture for this week, when this video comes out, but I happened to be in the plane during the conference. They moved the conference to a date that I cannot accommodate the lecture. So what I thought about is like, okay, it's silly to let this go to waste, so I do the lecture now for you. I talk about rituals sometimes, and I feel like I should pay more attention to it. One moment. When we are talking about ritual, this lecture is about the investigation of ritual in Chinese medicine. It is not a single part. There's going to be other parts that are going to be essential for the understanding of this thing. So you have to see it as a series. And it has relationships with particular kind of practice that we do, like the dragon breath, organ massage, particular kind of translations that I've done and I'm busy with for morning rituals and daily rituals and all kind of other things. Because many of the practices, like what we learn in Zonghu Qigong and so on, they are originally their Taoist practices. They all relate one way or the other into the preparation for doing ritual, or they provide you with the skills that you need in particular kind of rituals. So as such, practices like these, they are all very important, and there is no such thing as Chinese medicine without these practices to learn Chinese medicine, but the same practice that you need to learn Chinese medicine is also the practice that you need for learning ritual. And for this we have to ask ourselves a few questions. So what you have to understand is that we find rituals everywhere. Rituals, they seem to be very normal and natural to human beings, and therefore we can expect them to play a significant role in anybody's life. So you can't avoid having ritual being part of your life. And the problem is, though, that most people, they start implementing them in their life almost accidentally, and when you do something accidentally, it also accidentally can get out of control because you have no idea what it's actually doing. Like your phone is full with bloatware. Many rituals, they can eventually become bloatware because you learn through it things that you better shouldn't know. The way how you put on your TV, or the times that you watch TV, or when you watch your Instagram or TikTok or your Facebook or whatever kind of app you use, all these kind of things, including things like Reddit and right-wing or left-wing radical media, all these kind of things we do usually on fixed times, like we eat on fixed times, maybe we pray before we eating. But all these kind of things, they're rituals, and some of these rituals maybe are more damaging to you than you realize. So our society, in that sense, you can see, is really full of rituals, and as a result of that, we can say, okay, rituals we find really everywhere. At the moment when you talk about ritual as a special act or a series of acts that are performed in a precise manner and repeated often, and they often require also a particular kind of concentration, in some cases actually really like in a trance, that basically means that you're doing it on a sort of automatic pilot. You're conscious, but you're floating on the routine. This is where the word intuition comes from, because you have done something so many times, you've heard something so many times, you know it so well that, you know, in a trance you get to the answer without having to think. The definition encompasses not only learned behaviors but also biological behaviors in animals. That is a very important part to realize. And before I said that rituals are everywhere in human life, but you see in nature also many rituals. And there are basically 10 different kind of contexts in a ritual. These are greetings, these are group rituals, courtship, these are giving gifts, right? A very important part. There are spoken rituals in the form of song for seeking for a mate, for instance, but also unspoken rituals, particular kind of moves, even in play, in grieving, like elephants, in healing, like many animals, they look for particular kind of plants to heal them. You know, they just notice, it's in the nature to notice, so they know that that can help them, say, for instance, calm their stomach or deal with headache. In the same kind of way, we also see that there are rites of renewal for animals, and also all kind of migratory rituals. So that means that if you think you are unique because you do a ritual, and that you're special or anything like that, that is not the case. Like when we talk about Taoist things, we have a pathway towards transcendence, but we always say that the Tao is below everything, right? So it's the lowest part. That's also why we also talk very often, like, you know, water always seeks the lowest part. So be like water, because in that way, because of trying to become as low as possible, as little as possible, and as insignificant as possible, this is how you find Tao inside yourself or in your life as a whole. If you look for it. If you don't look for it, you just live in misery. That's another thing. So in essence, we can say that ritual can be defined as formalized or prescribed behavior. And we see that rituals are a feature of all known human societies, and they do not only include worship, rites, and sacraments of organized religions and cults, but also rites of passage, atonement, purification rites, oath of allegiance, dedication ceremonies, coronations, presidential inaugurations, I already mentioned them, marriages, funerals, and many more. I don't know if you ever got married. I was married 3 times, one in Shanghai for our friends. I was married in Tumen, that is in Dongbei, northeast China. And I was married in the Netherlands. In both the Dongbei and the Dutch marriage, we were involved with rituals, and rituals in the Korean society where my wife was part of, and my family in the Netherlands, or my friends and my students and my clients who were all there. That was a very different kind of ritual. But you see that in all these cases, every ritual that you perform around marriage, whatever culture it is, it actually sanctifies and gives you permission, and it also gives you meaningfulness about your marriage. The idea is, of course, that the marriage is like an alliance, right? And many other things in rituals that you do, they're also revolving around the idea of building alliances. So when you do a religious ritual, you build an alliance with a god, or with spirits, or with demons, or whatever kind of things. So simple things like a handshake, to agree on a deal, or even saying hello. This might already be a ritual. For instance, when you meet new people, you know, a handshake or an elbow nowadays, and making sure that you say your name, and that you have a friendly face, these kind of things. They're all ritual things that we do, and these ritual things, they make sure that we actually feel good with each other. That's a very important part. When you think about ritual, then in that sense, is if you do rituals, they are all focused on a particular kind of result. And if a ritual doesn't have a result, doesn't look for a particular kind of result, it is not really a ritual. So you can say that ritual is intended to achieve a particular kind of result and is expected to deliver that result. That is why we do it. You know, if you don't expect a result, why would you do it? Then it's just crazy to do so. But because of the expectation to deliver a particular kind of result, it is very often confused with magical and religious perspectives. And the way how they see reality in that sense is very often seen as magical or something like this, where that is basically a conviction that ritual is then based on, or religion anyway, or magic is based on the assumption of things because of correlative magic, while in fact that is not the case. But then for that, of course, you first have to study magic, and you have to study religion, and you have to participate in it to be able to understand what it actually does and what it is for. The reality is that when you perform scientific research, you also follow particular kind of procedures because you expect a particular kind of result. That result is going to be positive or negative. For instance, I was in Yangsheng. There was a large initiation rite for, I think it was a New Year festival, I've already forgotten. And there was a huge banner hanging somewhere, and they were performing a ritual, and they were expecting that banner to move in a particular kind of way so that they would know, it was for initiation of a new activity within the Taoist community to start building Taoism from an elite religion to a folk religion like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, so that they would grow to a larger world religion, to conquer the world basically with Taoism, like, you know, through my work also in some ways. So all these kind of things, they are like that, and these rituals are frequently done, maybe sometimes only once a year, maybe sometimes only once every 10 years, grand rituals, small rituals, daily rituals, and so on and so forth, but they are expecting particular kind of results. Because of that, we can call them repeatable, and they're listening to the law of repeatability, and that is what we do in science as well. We're looking for repeatability, and therefore we know, like, okay, so it is likely to be true. You cannot say that something is absolutely true, because you can have like 10 million times that it is true, but only one time that it is wrong, and then still, you know, the answer is always going to be relativistic as a result of that. That means that science in itself is a ritual science, you know. So modern science in itself is just a bunch of rituals, and it doesn't make it any worse than it is, because it has its values. But it is science. When you drive a car, you have to drive your car according to particular kind of rules, otherwise you bang into other cars. When you deal with your computer, you have to do that same thing. Now when we have to learn to deal with artificial intelligence, it is the same. And lawyers, they already know about the differences between the way how to approach a computer program that is talking to you, or how people talk to you. That is important. When you look at ritual, there is either an emic or an ethic approach. And ethic rituals are outward manifestations or behaviors of rituals, such as the steps or gestures or the way of speech. But when we look at the emic rituals, we are also looking at what is happening on the inside. When we're looking at what is on the inside, we want to understand how we change and how we alternate, or how we alter as a result of doing the ritual. So we're bringing ourselves, for instance, in another mental state to be able to communicate with gods or spirits or something like this. When you practice particular kind of practices that has originally that kind of purposes also. Then what I want to say, and that is in contrast with what you learn in Chinese medicine as a whole when you go study Chinese medicine anywhere, because Chinese medicine, everybody wants to adapt towards Western medicine science. So they want it to be scientifically correct and therefore anti-ritualistic and anti-behavioralistic also at the same time. But I always emphasize that Chinese medicine primarily is a medicine to restore your humanity. And being diseased means that something is wrong with your humanity. Somewhere in your life you started making choices that are counterproductive towards the health requirements that you actually have. So as a result of that, you become eventually sick. This is one of the essential parts of Chinese medicine. So we find this already in the Huangdi Yijing. We actually find it in earlier texts, but many people, they don't know the Huangdi Yijing, or they heard about it. This text, which you can best translate as the weft of internalization, according to Huangdi, or Huangdi's learning anyway. The title in that sense is not completely correct or enough. And the Huangdi Yijing says that health is depending on the correct posture of the body and the mind, and this is called the Jing. And very often nowadays people call the Jing the essence or the sperm or something like this, or something else, which is an essential substance that is floating through your body, that is in accord with what Western science would say. But in Chinese medicine, that basically means, how do you uphold yourself? How do you uphold your body form? And how do you manage yourself in things like Tai Chi Chuan, Qigong and so on. This is essential. There's particular kind of things you will not achieve if your body posture is not good. So that means that a lot of exercises, they are there only to get you into the right body posture, and that takes a long time in some cases, because you have to adapt the shape of your bones, you have to adapt the shape and the maturation of your muscles and the body cells and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things happening in your body which you're training. You're continuously altering the trends in which your body develops. Normally, from a particular kind of age, your body starts aging because it doesn't do things by itself anymore, and the inertia of your body starts taking over, and as a result that you start looking older and you start feeling older and so on. And most people actually, when they start seeing these signs, they start giving into that and they start living old people lives. But the whole point of Chinese medicine is to say, like, no. It is your behavioral things that are wrong, and therefore giving into that trend also is very wrong. What you have to do is you have to make sure that you actually go against that. And so by ritualizing your life, by ritualizing also the time and the methods that you use to develop yourself in your practice, as a result of that, you gradually change yourself and you can rejuvenate yourself because of that. So exercise, but also acupuncture, massage, and so on and so on, they can all contribute to that at particular points of your life. So to discuss that with somebody who is qualified to see what kind of things you actually need is a very essential part for most people, because most people, they are like blind people touching in the dark, and they're very often also relatively bad in understanding or listening to things as they are, because of the way how they followed their life at that point. And it is difficult to distract yourself or to take yourself away from the negative tendencies in your life. You have a particular kind of inertia to change, so you really need a coach that can help you with that. So healing, also the Hong Yijing says, and it's a very important part, is performed within a personal relationship with your practitioner, with your healer, and how that healer actually informs you in your behavior. So if he informs you in a way that is in accord with Western medicine, then it doesn't do that, because Western medicine is a statistical ritual. That means that if you see everybody do like this, then at that moment, this is the trend. So this is right. If the trend changes, then the statistics change, and then the outcome also changes. So Western science doesn't have a finite outcome or a goal or anything like that. It only bases itself on what you see that's happening, but not necessarily that what should be happening. While Chinese medicine, on the other hand, it says like, this is the ideal situation. People should be like an immortal or something like this. And as a result of that, you can take these steps. But you can only know which steps you know if you have got a good understanding of the underlying theory, literature, and so on and so forth, so that you can improve your relationship with yourself and with the environment around you, like what we recently did in the linked body practice, where you are learning to develop perception of the world around you to your own benefit, because you feel supported by your environment if you know it. If you don't know your environment, you only know where which chair is, then it doesn't mean that you understand your nature, and as a result, or the nature or the world around you. So as a result of that, you basically have no use for that environment, and it then becomes changeable. You don't build anything, you don't build a relationship with the environment around you. Like, for instance, when I walk outside, I always greet the birds, and I very often recognize the birds, and the birds recognize me. They're always surprised in the beginning period, and when they are new, and I start talking to them. But at a certain point, you start noticing some birds, they're insulted if you forget them, because maybe you're a little bit too busy in your mind, or you're busy with something else, like in my case, that I walk with my kids, and then they greet me, and they say like, hey, you should greet me. Or sometimes some crow didn't see me, I greet them, and they're actually looking for their friends. And then they change their tone, because all of a sudden they start talking to you, and for you they have a different kind of speaking. And then they talk to their friends again when they reply, and they go back to what they were saying. But they also at the same time keep track of what you're doing and where you are going, and they see you coming from a long time. And that is very satisfying as a thing, because it helps you to understand that you are part of a larger society. A city or a village or any place like that is not only its human citizens, but it's also its pet citizens, but it's also the citizens who live in the seams of our society. That is the birds, the mice, the rabbits, the foxes that are running through the city. You name it, any kind of animal, the different plants, they all have their own intelligence and their own needs. Another book, what is very important for understanding ritual in Chinese medicine, is the yijing, because for Chinese people, the yijing is a very essential part of Confucianism, and it helps you to see ritual in your life and to include ritual in your life to make sure that you don't make mistakes, that you don't have to make. So if you ritualize particular aspects of your life that you know, like, okay, I'm going to have a good outcome, then that is a very important part. I will not go too deep into all these different kind of things, but the ideas of Confucian yijing and the Book of Rites is that, primarily perform ritual in daily life to avoid getting into conflict. So by correct ritualistic behavior, everybody knows that your intentions are okay in your general approach of these people, and therefore they cannot blame you when something goes wrong. It's not your fault, and that is very important, because at that moment you do not produce guilt, because that guilt that you produce hangs around you. It starts motivating your behavior because you feel that you're in error and you have to overcompensate to either hide it or to correct it or something like this. Well, if you have done something wrong, you cannot correct it anymore because it already happened. You can't go to the past and change it. Yes, and people, they are creating an identity avatar for you every time when you meet somebody, and this avatar is going to be tainted at the moment when they feel like you have made a mistake. Like, for instance, you have very good friends, you are very close to each other, you trust each other, but then one way or the other, one moment something goes wrong in your relationship, you behave wrong, and then they don't trust you anymore, and it takes forever to rebuild that trust. And then when that trust is being rebuilt, you make an error again, and then they fall back, because people, they tend to forgive in words, but they don't forget. So at the moment when you repeat your behavior, the unforgiveness also comes back by itself. And the nice thing, though, is that the yijing also shows, Confucianism as a whole, it shows that ritual is something that can be learned by everybody. Ritual behavior can be learned, and that is very liberating. It is more like a language. So if you have agreement about what works and what doesn't work, and we know from a lot of things like this works, like saying hello every time when you come into a room, introducing yourself, and so forth and so forth. Whatever kind of introduction you do. For instance, very often I'm coming in with my hairpin and so on, and my Taoist clothing or my Kung Fu clothing, whatever. So everybody knows, like, oh yeah, that's this idiot again. So that's then the name, of course, that they give me. But as a result of that, I don't have to introduce myself, because they know who I am, because of my image that I create about myself. That helps. I'm very shy by nature, so when I come into a room and I have to go say hello to everybody, that is, I draw then a lot of attention. So it's better to make the right kind of walk in so that everybody knows, and then we head it over and I can just do the things that I'm supposed to do in that room. The Sinosphere is full of this kind of things. The yijing has been translated in all the local languages and so on. So all these cultures like China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam and so on, they are saturated with this ritualistic behavior. But also Western philosophers like Hegel, for instance, Engels, they saw benefits in the yijing and they read some parts and they included ritualistic aspects in their philosophies. What ritual does, it generates connectivity, and therefore also it creates communication. When you are doing a ritual, you bring yourself into a ritual space, and the experience as such can then be seen as sacred. Whether it is in a secular setting or whether it's in a religious setting, that doesn't really matter. The sensation is the same. So that is why sometimes things feel very meaningful. Like, for instance, when you get your diploma from school. Like when you study Chinese medicine with me, I make a special ritual for making sure you get your ritual, because that ritual is a very important aspect of, making sure that you find yourself acknowledged in the fact that you have actually really studied. So when you study with me, you don't get your diploma without actually having studied. So you really have to make sure that you study. You can take a longer time. It doesn't really matter. You can take 10 years, 20 years to study. I don't really care. I mean, that is just how life sometimes goes. But in itself, the outcome has to be satisfactory in regard to the classics. The Hong Yijing says, for instance, the reason why many people are not suitable for medicine is because they don't have the patience to actually study. They don't take the time and they don't mature enough to get to that point. So as a teacher, traditionally, you have to have somebody under your wings, and you have to make sure that they gradually mature and that they come to understand things. And whether they go into the esoteric parts of medicine, or in the shamanic parts, or in the practical parts, or they just go become a teacher or anything like that, all these kind of things, they're all very important, but they have to be mature enough and to understandably they have to be understandable enough to be able to do that. So concluding, we can say that life itself is in that sense a sacred ritual space, and we can also say that ritual is that what gives meaning to life. Taoist culture speaks of Tao's original connection between everything that exists. So that's a very important part. And then the man's supreme Tao is to produce all things without existence. That means that they don't have an existence yet, that you basically create things out of nothing and to transform them into phenomena, and then make sure that you don't damage them. In some texts they are called without killing them. The external ritual in Taoism and medicine and ritual as a whole, magic, is combined with internal ritual. So there's always an outer and inner component. The external ritual is to communicate with the three existing realms of heaven, earth, human beings, and earth and water. Water actually, not human beings. And it can be found anywhere inside and around us. So we are already part of these things, but we don't normally separate these things consciously. And as a result, that we cannot really communicate in the right way, because for heaven you have to do some things, and for earth you have to do some things. That's what we also learned when we studied yijing as part of our communication and coaching procedures as a foundation for Taoist psychology. Because at that moment, in seeing these different realms, you see that the yijing is about that aspect, to make sure that the yijing shows you, like, this is the separation between these realms, and this is where we can act and where we cannot act. Then there is the communally agreed factor of ritual. This agreed ritual provides a safe path towards other states of consciousness. If you're a shaman, for instance, you don't have guardrails, so you basically invent your own rituals, and it works or it doesn't work. If you have a talent, you make it work. If you don't have a talent, it doesn't work. You can follow a course, but everything might just take place in your mind. What Taoism does basically is using some of the elements of shamanism, but by making sure that many people, they use the same guardrails. As a result of that, the rituals become more strong. There's still shamanic rituals in a particular kind of way, but because there's an agreement, there's this more like a sort of a field of understanding in what should be created and what should be happening. As a result of that, the person performing the ritual is less likely to make mistakes, because they have learned all the different kind of steps to make sure that things work. When you work with spirits, gods, and so on, demons, you understand that one little mistake can cost you dearly. So it's very important to make sure that you do not get to that point, and you have to be properly trained, because sometimes you also make a wrong judgment, and that can really disturb your relationship with these realms, and your whole ritualistic performance can go backwards as a result of that. I experienced it myself by trusting some of the people I did ritual work for, and at the moment when these people betrayed the rules of the ritual, betrayed the agreements that I made in the ritual, then at that moment it backfires to me, because then that means, because my judgment is not good, I'm also not valuable as a ritualist, and it takes years and years to rebuild that strength and trust in your relationship with nature to be able to do a ritual properly again. Learning ritual is an essential part of Chinese medicine. Exercise, for instance, is an essential part in Chinese medicine, because it is the only way how a person can find health by themselves. You can eat, of course, and you can influence your health, but it takes a long time. Exercise, in that sense, is much faster. But also full talismanic writing, making hand gestures, like I showed before. Also, when you do Daoyin, guiding practices, breath work, stepping, walking, absorbing essences of nature, like trees or the moon or the sun or anything like that. Or when you are doing transformative exercise to transform yourself into an animal, to come to understand what that animal can do for you. And in that sense, meditation also is a pathway towards this awareness and a sense of space and freedom through ritual. And you see in my text I have a few spelling mistakes here that I missed. Exercise lets you develop also an inclusive worldview. But of course you have to have the right theory underlining it. If you just do energy work, you don't really get that. You get all kind of feelings and stuff like this, but they are abstractions and they don't help you to get related to the world as it actually is. So as a result of that, it actually moves you away from things. So you can say that basically energy work is demonic work because, you know, it makes you more confused, and the actual concrete ritualistic work with the right use of language, words, and so on actually becomes more effective as a result of it. And that is essential for Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine says, like, look, as a practitioner, if you don't perform your rituals in the right way, like the writing of medicinal recipes, to give intention to your herbs when you give them to a person, and they have to be also included as a recipe inside the herbal concoction to make sure that the herbs know what they need to do. Yeah, because the herbs are there also only as servants, you can say. So then ritual also is a Taoist learning tool, like what we learn in the Zhongwu classes. I'm currently translating the Cloud Cover of 7 Corruptions. That is the Orthodox Tao Tsang. It's basically a summary of everything that the Tao Tsang also teaches. It is not organized in the same way though. But the Yunji Qijia, that's what it's called, it links ritual to discipline of the self, and therefore the self-cultivation to become a better human. And that is actually where the healing takes place. When you become a better human, actually you start healing and you start working on your rejuvenation. And that rejuvenation eventually can lead in the next step to your immortality, like in the Golden Flower text. Discipline, therefore, is also seen, the ritual discipline is seen as a means to learn the difference between good and evil. And when you are not learning the proper differences between what is good and what is bad, then at that moment, of course, there's no chance to make the right decisions in life. So there are some concluding questions I'm going to end with. That is for our next session. I see I missed the L here, so I really have to work on this text. There is the question, is performing ritual a moral action? That is very important. So is it moral to actually ritualize your life? You have to think about that. On the basis of what I'm just telling you here, I think you could already find some answers. And also then, therefore, as a counter question, is it actually immoral not to ritualize? Not to ritualize, so these are important points. I would like to know what you think about it. So if you can put your answer below and tell me or contact me in all the ways possible, or when you are part of the Daoland program and we are in sessions, you can tell me or explain me, or you know how to reach me on a private channel with WhatsApp or other means, then I'm very curious about what you think. I will write these visions down so that I can also start answering this for our next session. So I hope you really enjoyed this lecture, and I think it is a very exciting subject, and I think it is a subject that will definitely become a very important part of Chinese medicine in the future if people are willing to let go of their obsessive need to be recognized by Western science, because Western science is just a ritual science, just like Chinese medicine is a ritualistic science in the same way, or in a similar way, because it comes to different answers, different methods, and so on and so forth. It finds different things important. There's no way better than any other way, and everything works under particular circumstances. It can be required in particular kind of circumstances. There are holes in Chinese medicine, but there are also holes in Western medicine and modern medicine. You have to understand also there are more people in the world using Chinese medicine than they are using Western medicine. So if every Chinese medicine user, not even the practitioners but the users, are willing to understand something about Chinese medicine from its original ritualistic perspective and its psychological and behavioralistic perspective, then the world will already become a very different place, because as you know, the world knows some problems and we really need to do something about it. So thank you very much for listening. Sign up, please sponsor our program if you can, for just a few euros a month. You will help me with this. I will make also a new program very soon where you can support our translation effort, also just for a little bit, so that I can make sure that I set time aside for these kind of things.